This is a funny story. As I was telling some of the monks yesterday evening, it happened once that there was a lady who came in the evening to Bodhinyana Monastery. This was several years ago, and unfortunately she, I could see from her wrist, she still had that tag they put on the wrist. She was in Bentley Hospital with no psychiatric problems. And so I recognized her, and I said, well, you really do need to go back to hospital. She said, no, you told me to come here on the psychic plane. So I realized there's a problem here, and so she didn't want to leave. So one thing which I did know, there was some people who worked for they called it the PET team at the time, psychiatric emergency team. So we called them. Trouble is, we live down in Serpentine, it's a long way away. So by the time they came, it took a while to settle her down. But then, when they arrived at the gate, they asked me how she'd been behaving. And at one time she threw a cup of tea at me. I didn't mind the cup breaking, but what a waste of tea. But nevertheless, I told them that. I said, if we have anybody who's got psychiatric problems and is also violent, we have to call the police. So the only police station which was there at the time was over in Armadale. So we called them up, said they would come. This is our local police station in Armadale. And they didn't know the way to Bodhinyana Monastery. They went by Serpentine Dam, which is twice as long as it should be. And so we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. But then when the police actually did come, the psychiatrists, they know the stuff about the mind, but sometimes they lose what we call their common sense, because they left their headlights on all the time. And so their car had no electricity in the batteries anymore. And so when with the police they asked this lady to go back into hospital, they could not take her. They didn't have any power in their car. And the rules for the police couldn't take them, it was against their rules. So they were stuck. But fortunately we talked the police into taking her into the hospital. But sometimes that's what happens when you leave your car lights on. all sorts of problems happen afterwards. But when anything like this happens, anything which is troublesome, it just, to me, I always say, it gives me a nice story to talk about later on. Like even today, just on the way in here, we went past on the way back from doing a blessing at an office. Interesting blessing, I don't mind saying this, because it was one of the old buildings on Murray Street, and they had a ghost in there. So they wanted me to go and bless the buildings. Sometimes I say ghost busting, but that's a bit unkind to the poor ghosts. I'm not a violent monk. I will not bust a ghost. Instead of busting a ghost, just being kind to it. Sitting down, and as far as I was concerned, there was a ghost there. And so to be able to give it such kindness, to relax it, to make it very peaceful, and give it a lot of what we call merits. Because I'm a monk, a senior monk, I do a lot of meritorious actions, so I shared my merits with the ghost. With the hope that the ghost would receive those merits. And what actually happens is the mind gets just so joyful, so happy, that someone is not afraid of it, not trying to get rid of it, but just giving it a boost of kindness. And if ever you receive that boost of kindness, your mind gets joyful. And it's from that the mind gets the ghost gets reborn into a much better realm. It doesn't really belong in the ghost realm. The ghost realm is for minds which are just quite lost, lonely, depressed, not so much energy. But anyway, So I did that little job. And then after that, just coming back, we went past, just round the Catholic cathedral, there was Mercedes girls' school. Is it still girls' school or is it co-ed now? It's still girls. Because I will never forget that school. I did give a talk there once. It's just what's fascinating being a monk. You go to all sorts of places to give talks. So I went to give a talk, and the next day I was walking down St. George's Terrace. I forget exactly what I was doing, what business I was attending to, but then a couple of the girls came past me. And they said, "Oh, you're the monk who gave a talk at our school yesterday." And I said to them, "Wow, I'm surprised you remembered me." And they replied by saying, "We'll never forget you." Oh, that's so kind. And then they said, "We'll never forget you. How can you ever forget a monk called Ajahn Brahm?" It's teenage girls trying to tease you. And instead of getting upset, I said, "Oh, thank you." And I've repeated that story so many times. I'm glad that they gave me that extra material for my Friday night talks. And so that's one of the things with life. When life happens, you learn how to never get offended or surprised by it, but take it on board and enjoy it. And understand what these things mean when somebody dies and they become a ghost. And actually how the joy can take them out of that sense of negativity. Even to the point, I know that sometimes people say I go too far with some of these statements, but I don't mind, because this is what I know. That when, say, a person gets depressed, how do you get a person out of the depressed state? Even this life, this birth, you're still a human being. How can you get them out of that depressed state? And if they're very, very, very depressed or something and they can hurt themselves, okay, some drugs. But even better than that is give them joy, happiness. Crack a joke if you can. And that's one of the problems I was saying to the monks, that I tell jokes to the monks and they always laugh. Because I'm their boss. And if they don't laugh, they get into big trouble. They're not big trouble. But anyway, I always like to see the funny side of life. And if you can show a person who's depressed the funny side of life, and they start to smile and they start to have joy and they start to laugh, that actually cracks them out of depression. It may be only just momentarily, but they see another way of looking at life. You're not changing the circumstances in which they live, you're just changing the way they react to life. And that's a whole different ball game. I know people think, I'm really depressed, I'm in trouble, my goodness, that the rents are going up, I can't afford it, I have to work so hard, what am I going to do? If any of you are in trouble with your rent, and you find it's very difficult to make ends meet in Perth these days, the solution is really easy. Become a monk or a nun. Please excuse me. I made you laugh a little bit. Have you ever noticed you cannot laugh and have fear at the same time? For some reason it just takes away the negativity in your mind, so you just basically can't be afraid of things. That's one of the reasons. If it was allowed and I cracked a joke and no one laughed, I'd try and tickle you, just to get you out of just the negativity. Unfortunately, people will say that's abuse. You can't touch anything these days. So what you do is, you learn. It's what I've done. I wonder, why am I teaching? Why do many people want to talk to you? Why do many people ask these questions? Now you can get all the answers to many of these questions online, in books, from other places. But sometimes it's just who's actually giving those answers. It's more than just the information. It's the kindness which comes with that information. And that is my job, to be able to share that kindness with each one of you. A little smile. But then what happens, that you're not here all the time. So if you're really depressed or getting fed up with the world and starting wondering where this world is going, the most important thing to do is for you to go into your bathroom, where you'll find a mirror, and look at your face in that mirror. Smile. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but that's one of the most amazing little tips which I was given by my first meditation teacher, who was a Thai lay person. He just told me I'm not smiling enough. It was true. And so he basically gave me these exercises to do every morning. I know sometimes the monks say I should do some more exercise. I do exercise. Every morning I do 10 push-ups. That's quite a lot for a 71-year-old. 10 push-ups. How many push-ups do you do in the morning? But my 10 push-ups are very easy, suitable for my age. I look at myself in the mirror, my 2 fingers. 1, 2, 3. I make a silly face at myself. And I always end up laughing. Now imagine being able to do that every morning. To look at yourself in the mirror and laugh at yourself. That had a huge effect on giving me energy. The first time I started this, I was just a student at university. Sometimes at those days, I must admit I wasn't keeping 5 precepts when I started university. I certainly was at the end of the university. Sometimes in the morning you felt, ugh. You had a headache, hangover, you've been late at night, you're studying or talking to your friends late at night, you weren't sleeping properly. But nevertheless, you could always manage a little smile. And that little smile changed my life. Sometimes I tell this to young people. Young people are looking for a nice partner in life. What makes you most attractive? Your smile. Do you want to spend your life married to a miserable guy? Or a miserable woman? The smile is actually the simplest makeup you can possibly put on. And I don't know why this is, but wherever I tend to go, and this is true, the other monks will agree with this, wherever I go, people like taking photographs with me, or photographs of me. And what on earth are you doing? I'm an old guy, old and fat. Why do you want to take a photograph of me? You can imagine these 2 monks, like Wazzy, he's nice and young, and Passato, he's kind of middle-aged. Is that right? Yeah. And me? Well, I get so many photographs. It got to the point that in Indonesia, any Indonesians here? Oh, there you go, yes. Indonesia are crazy about taking photographs. All these stories. It's so lucky to meet you, can we take a photograph of you? Of course I don't mind, but there was about 60 or 70 of them. And they had to have the group photograph, individual photographs, photographs with their close family. It was taking forever. And that's the only time when I had a connecting flight, and when I got to the gate, they were calling out my name. Mr. Brahma Wangso, your flight is about to leave, come quickly. I almost missed my flight because of that. I tried to stop the problem. The reason I tried to stop the problem, the way I started to stop the problem, I was telling people that when I went to that big monument in central Java, Borobudur, there were signs there saying, please don't take photographs of the great monument, Borobudur. And I said, well, ask why? Actually, the flashes of the camera hitting the stone was destroying the monument. It's proved scientifically. And I said, well, look at me. I'm degrading fast. So they thought that was very funny, so they took more photographs. But that's one of the nice things about life. Instead of getting upset or angry or irritated, upset, you can actually join in the fun, which means you don't degrade, which means the joy, doesn't allow you to get depressed or afraid. That's one of the wonderful things about learning how to overcome fear and anxiety. I was just asking Prem, because I'm going to go to Colombo soon. I think that's next month, isn't it? Yeah, next month. And I had to cancel an important engagement here in Perth. That was in the Buddhist Council. Done an amazing thing, managing to get a reception in Parliament House here in Perth, celebrating Wesak. But unfortunately I'll be in Colombo at the time, can't attend. And I've got a good reason, because one of those events over there, that was in this big place, the Bandaranaike Memorial International Convention Hall, BMICH. And I just asked Prem, how many people going? How many? 10,000. A gig, just done by me. 10,000. Two things I started to be concerned about. Number one, what if I give a terrible talk? What if I give such a bad talk that no one wants to be a Buddhist ever again? For me, I respect Buddhism so much. That's a personal thing, but I respect it enormously. And so I think that would be, I feel so guilty if I don't actually give my very best and so inspire people, help people. This was in Singapore, and people don't have much time in Singapore. And about 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 people came that evening. They gave up, probably just had to rush a lunch, or rather rush a dinner, and just give up everything else just to come and an Ang Mo monk, the white monk. So anyhow, I was concerned if I failed. But then I was also concerned if I succeeded. It's a big audience, it's so easy to get proud and arrogant. And if you get proud and arrogant, that's probably even worse than failing. I become just... So, it's one of the reasons these days I try my very best